Welcome to Education Insight. I'm Lacey Kendall. As another school year comes to an end, the Inland region has much to celebrate. This month, over 24,000 students graduated from our local colleges and universities. At Crafton Hills College, they enjoyed more graduates than any year in its 61-year history. So, congratulations to all of the graduates. The coming school year will bring new challenges. And while administrators and educators try to create more opportunities for student success, policy is generally the biggest determinant of how well our students can do. Today on Education Insight, we welcome three guests whose work is focused on education policy here in the Inland Empire. What's working and what's not. Marie Sakrekoff, who leads Growing Inland Achievement, a network of education, government, and business partners in the Inland Empire, who are all working on increasing educational attainment, joins us. Also, Dr. Nohemy Ornelas, the Vice Chancellor of Educational and Student Support Services for the San Bernardino Community College District. She tells us how policy is changing the student experience for the better and where she has concerns. She joins us as well. But first we meet Dr. Brittney Quintinar. As a Norco College counselor, she helps students negotiate a wide array of struggles. Her recent dissertation paper takes a close look at the biggest difficulties for college students right here, right now. Dr. Quintinar, welcome to Education Insight.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Lacey.
Yeah. First off, could you describe your work at Norco College?
Sure. So I began working at Norco in January of 2018, and most of my time at Norco has been spent serving as a STEM counselor. So throughout the years at Norco College, we've attained several different federal and state STEM grants. And the purpose of the programming that we create with this grant funding is to increase our pipeline of students who are pursuing science, technology, and engineering degrees, and particularly focus on students from historically marginalized populations such as our Hispanic, Latino students, our Black and African American students, students who may be the first in their family to go to college, students from low-income backgrounds, and also increasing our pipeline of women in STEM fields, particularly in engineering and technology, where they are definitely underrepresented. So as a counselor, I work with students and provide career, academic, and personal counseling. And working with community college students, I really believe my most important role is to be their biggest cheerleader, number one. And then number two, to act as their guide in navigating our complex systems, because many of our students lack the social capital to navigate our systems and processes successfully. So when we think about students and their relationship with a counselor in high school, a high school counselor will hand them their schedule and they don't have much say in the matter. And then the moment they step foot on a college campus, the burden of responsibility and choice shifts to their shoulders. And so as a college student, they're faced with many decisions, including their class schedule, when they're taking classes, how they're taking classes, not to mention the larger decisions like what career path they're going to follow, what majors lead to their desired career path. So it can definitely be a steep learning curve for our students, especially if they're not coming from a family or a community where they have a lot of role models who've been through these processes before. So in addition to working with students directly, I also work closely with our STEM faculty and our articulation officer to try to identify articulation gaps in courses for the universities that our students really want to transfer to so that we can reduce those gaps and increase the number of classes our students can take at Norco before they transfer out to a university.
Doctor, you mentioned your research, and you've made some interesting discoveries. Could you start by briefly describing that research on public higher education? What were you most hoping to learn?
So as a counselor working with students over the last decade, at the ground level, day in and day out, I have witnessed how various institutional procedures or even state-level policies really impact students' retention and success. And I really wanted to dig deeper into those issues. Looking at a lot of the research on student success, it's been more focused on student characteristics, such as their background or maybe their academic preparation in high school, or even something like their resilience or grit factors. But I wanted to illuminate how our structures and policies can also contribute to or even inhibit student success.
As a California Community College alumni and now counselor, how do you help students on a day-to-day basis navigate their way through higher education? And where do you see them struggling the most?
Yeah, so Lacey, as you mentioned, I would say I am a proud alumni and success story of our California Community College system. I personally attended 2 different community colleges here in the Inland Empire before I transferred on to Cal State San Bernardino. And throughout my personal experience, I did have to work full-time while I was in school, 40 hours, 5 days a week to support myself. And I can imagine now, fast forward to present day, the struggles that our students face are probably just amplified with cost of living factors and inflation. And so when we actually look at the national data, over 80% of community college students do have to work, half of which are working at least full-time. And then when we look at our California data, we know at least 2/3 of the community college students are working while they're in school. And for the 1/3 of students who maybe are not working, most of them are actively looking for work. And I see this as I'm working individually with students every day. So it's a hard truth that our students bear the responsibility of having to provide for their basic needs. And if we think back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, how much can a student really concentrate on their studies if they're worried about where they're going to be sleeping that night, or if they're worried about if they're going to have food that day. So it's really important as a counselor that I'm able to uncover these hard truths when I'm working with students so that I can connect them with the appropriate resources that we have on campus or in the local community. And like I said, a lot of my time is spent in meetings with them, just helping them find employment, whether that's searching for on-campus jobs for them, looking at local community jobs, helping them develop, a cover letter, a resume, practicing their interviewing skills because they need to have their immediate needs met first before they can really focus on school. And so I feel like as an institution, if we're also keeping this in mind that most of our students are working one or more jobs, and also their work schedules are very different depending on their employer, if we can continue to innovate and adapt how and when we're offering classes to meet their needs. And quite frankly, traditionally, this is where our competitors, our for-profit institutions or fully online schools, have been able to capitalize on the weaknesses of our public institutions.
If you just joined us, you're listening to Education Insight. Our guest today by telephone is Dr. Brittnee Quintinar. She is a counselor at Norco College who has conducted a great deal of research focusing on barriers that students face when they're pursuing a baccalaureate degree. Doctor, can you tell us a little bit more about your dissertation study, Marginalizing the Majority, Barriers to California Baccalaureate Attainment? First off, tell us, if you will, what you mean by marginalizing the majority.
Yeah, so I was very intentional in adding that phrase to my dissertation title because the data proved what I was suspecting as a practitioner, that the majority of students in California who were wanting to earn a baccalaureate degree are starting their college career off at a community college. When we look at California compared to national data, in California, we are second to last for providing access to four-year institutions. So only 28% of California students are enrolled at a four-year university, which means that the other 3/4 are attending a community college. So this is directly limiting their access to the baccalaureate level education. When we compare California to larger populous states like Texas, Florida, and New York, their rates are much higher, sitting at 50 to 80% of their students are enrolled at a four-year school. So some may argue, well, Brittany, not all students attending a community college desire to earn a bachelor's degree. they may be attending a community college to get a vocational certificate or an associate's degree that will ultimately lead to their desired career, which is true. But when we bring and onboard students into our system, that's a question that they're asked. And 3/4 of the students that start off at a California community college do have an ultimate goal of earning a bachelor's degree or higher. And so then, Lacey, you may say, well, why does it matter if our students are starting at a community college? How does that impact them? Well, unfortunately, only 5% of our students that start at a community college who want to earn a bachelor's degree or higher are actually obtaining one within 6 years of starting school. And that's because only about 18% of them actually transfer successfully to a four-year university within 4 years, and only 28% are transferring successfully to a four-year university within 6 years.
Yeah.
And then when we actually disaggregate our admission data for our community colleges versus Cal State system versus the University of California, overwhelming majority of our students from marginalized communities from low-income backgrounds are more likely to be starting their college career at a community college versus a four-year school. So in essence, it's almost like we're reproducing economic and social stratification across the state.
Would you share with us who the participants in your study were, and also the, I think, startling discoveries that you made in that study?
Before you answer that, we need to take a quick break. More with our guest, Dr. Brittney Quintinar of Norco College, in just a moment. This is Education Insight. This is Education Insight. Before the break, we met Dr. Brittney Quintinar. She's the author of a study called Marginalizing the Majority, which put her in front of California's university and state leaders in education, talking specifically about policy. Dr. Quintinar, before the break, I asked if you would share the startling discoveries that you found in your research regarding the roadblocks to local college and university student success.
Yeah, so as a counselor, I know my perspective is quite different than what a college president or university chancellor may experience. And so I knew that I wanted to interview our higher education CEOs because they hold a unique vantage point in terms of straddling two different worlds. So they're straddling what I would call the macro level, so where we have state and system-wide policies that are pushed down to our institutions. And then their role as the president or chancellor is really to somehow lead or implement these said policies at their respective campuses by also managing and navigating their constituency expectations, so of the students, the faculty, the staff, and even our local industry partners. And so during the summer of 2021, I had the honor and privilege of interviewing 47 different CEOs across the state, including 28 California community college presidents, 8 California State University presidents, and then 11 University of California chancellors or vice chancellors. And no matter what we were talking about in our interviews, whether we were discussing their business operations, academic or curricular decisions, or even improving intersegmental partnerships and relationships, the underlying theme that they revealed was being part of one of these very large higher education systems. And I should add that in California, our 3 systems are the largest in the nation, that there seems to be this tension and inverse relationship for the campus or the CEO to balance their autonomy as a unique individual school with statewide or system office demands for uniformity. And so some CEOs clearly voiced their preference for uniformity, such as streamlining existing transfer pathways, while other CEOs cautioned against one-size-fits-all legislative mandates because each campus serves unique regional industry and unique student needs.
You have said before that there are three broad themes in this study: systemic barriers and institutional practices and societal determinants. Could you explain those for us?
Yeah, so the majority of questions that I was posing to the CEOs that I interviewed were related to baccalaureate access and attainment for both our university freshmen as well as our vertical transfer hopeful students from the community colleges. And so as a result of my 47 different interviews, it ended up with 897 pages of qualitative data that I had to sift through and analyze to try to uncover common themes. Mm-hmm. And what I ended up was with 15 different major problems that would be organized into three broad themes, like you mentioned. So those are systemic barriers, institutional practices, and societal determinants. So systemic barriers are those that dominate at the macro sphere, such as our state legislation, funding structures, financially policies, or even the declining public opinion on the value of a college degree. Institutional practices that emerged as barriers included the historical nature and rigidity in our higher education systems and the difficulty in breaking our bureaucratic practices that are embedded into our very ecosystem, which can often impede student retention and completion. And some of these institutional practices are what I refer to as housekeeping barriers. So one such example is the practice that at many schools, traditionally when a student goes to register for classes, they're given a set period of time to pay that bill, whether that's 2 days or a week. And if they didn't pay within that timeline, they were automatically dropped from all their classes. What I've noticed over the last 5 years or so is that several of our community colleges have started to relax these payment rules. So now some students are given 6 months or even longer to pay off their bill without being dropped from their classes. Some are given opportunities to set up payment plans. Other examples of housekeeping barriers are things that on the surface would seem very minimal or minuscule, and they often relate to paperwork. And so these are often things that students just don't understand or know that they're required to do. So an example of this would be, the requirement that we make a student formally apply to receive their diploma, to have it posted to their transcript, or for transfer students, making them request their general education certification be sent to the university they're going to. So the last broad theme was the societal determinants, and those are factors that really shape a student's economic or social and human capital before they ever even step foot at the college campus. And this is really the result of different things they're exposed to in their childhood, whether that's through social media, the community, family influences that they're exposed to or not exposed to throughout their life.
Did you observe anything that stood out to you, ways that this region might differ from the rest of our state or even the rest of our country?
Yeah, so I think I can speak to both the region and the state. So in California, we are the 5th largest economy in the world and home to 2 of the biggest money-making industries with Hollywood and the Silicon Valley. But yet 4 in 10 Californians are still living in poverty or sitting right at the poverty level. And when we look at people living in the Inland Empire, which is comprised of, Riverside and San Bernardino counties, we see that the higher paying jobs are usually found outside of our community, more so in Orange County or LA County. And so we're often having to commute for those higher paying jobs. And, research obviously shows that with higher level education, we're more likely to increase our social and economic standing and get out of poverty. However, in our region, in the Inland Empire, we traditionally have one of the lowest college-going and attainment rates in the state. We're usually just right above the Central Valley rates. And so when we look across the state, there are vast differences depending on the region. So on average in California, 35% of adults age 25 or older have a bachelor's degree or higher. But in San Bernardino County, only about 20% of adults age 25 or older have a bachelor's degree or higher. But if you compare that to, say, up north in San Mateo County, over 50% of adults up there have a bachelor's degree or higher. Also, adding to our region perspective, my husband is an elementary teacher, and he's worked in San Bernardino County for 2 decades. He also grew up in this community. And what he sees and shares with me is, our young students, often they're never given the opportunity, or they don't have the financial means to leave their local community, get out of our county to experience and learn about other careers outside of their local communities, and also learn of, higher education opportunities outside of our local communities. That's where programs like AVID and Upward Bound are so beneficial to expand our students' knowledge base and hopefully also increase their social capital. Because unfortunately in California, the attainment of a bachelor's degree or higher is definitely uneven across different regions and across different racial and economic populations.
If you just joined us, you're listening to Education Insight. Our guest is Dr. Brittney Quintinar of Norco College. We're discussing her research on barriers that students face when pursuing a baccalaureate degree. Doctor, what do you think needs to be done by policy or by legislation to improve California undergraduate participation and boost that graduation rate?
So by far the top 2 concerns that were discussed by the CEOs that I interviewed surrounded money. Mm-hmm. So state funding and investments in higher education. And then number 2, student financial aid structures. Our current funding structures fund community colleges at half of what a University of California gets for their student enrollment. And in theory, one could argue that since community colleges are serving a higher need population, that we should be at least equal, if not have more funding to serve our student populations and get them to that finish line. In terms of the financial aid allocations, when we look at the Pell Grant and Cal Grant monies, community college students are actually awarded less for cost of living compared to students who are attending the UC or the Cal State. So this idea that a university student should be awarded more financial aid because they live on campus in dorms, while a community college student is supposedly saving money by living at home, I feel is a huge misnomer. Is it really reasonable to think that a student attending, let's say, Santa Barbara City College is spending less on their living expenses than a student attending UC Santa Barbara if they're living in the same community? And as I stated earlier, our community college students have the burden of, they have 1 or more jobs to support themselves or to help contribute to their family expenses. And there was actually a study done on this to look at the starting point for a student, whether they started their college career at a community college, a Cal State, or a UC. And for students who do have more financial need, what the study actually found is that the students who are starting off at community college end up spending more to earn their degree over time. And this is really contradictory to what most people would assume, because when you look at the sticker price of going to community college, our sticker price is $46 a unit compared to, say, $6,000 for a Cal State or $13,000 for the UC tuition. But because of how our financial aid formulas and structures are, it can actually cost more because the students are being awarded less financial aid in terms of their cost of living expenses. And then I would also add that for both state funding allocations to the schools and our student financial aid formulas, there's definitely a need to incorporate some type of cost of living metric to account for the vast differences across the state in terms of the institution's operating expenses as well as the student financial aid formulas. Because when you look at the U.S. Department of HUD data for what's considered a low-income family of 4, across half of California, that threshold or benchmark is sitting around $55,000 a year. But in many counties across the state, low-income threshold is triple that and in the 6-figure mark. So this can actually impede non-local students' ability to move out of their region to attend a school that happens to be in a higher cost of living area. And in some cases, the Cal States that do have space to take on and admit additional students are located in these higher cost of living areas, which makes it very difficult for neo-traditional students to leave their community to attend school in one of these areas.
Dr. Quintinar, a counselor at Norco College, who has conducted a great deal of research on the struggles that our students are facing right here in our own backyard and indeed beyond throughout California when trying to pursue a baccalaureate degree. We appreciate you joining Education Insight today.
Thank you so much for your time and having me join the show, Lacey.
If you'd like to learn more about Dr. Quintinar's report or about Norco College, go to www.norcocollege.edu. You're listening to Education Insight, talking about policies that are making success a reality for inland students and where we need to be pushing for new policy. Our next guest is Dr. Nohemy Ornelas, the Vice Chancellor of Educational and Student Support Services for the San Bernardino Community College District, where she oversees industry partnerships, workforce training, and manages programs focused on helping students reach their academic and career goals. Dr. Ornelas, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Could you start by describing your work as the Vice Chancellor for the San Bernardino Community College District?
Yes, I'd like to first start by sharing a little bit of my background and what's led me to being able to serve in this wonderful capacity for San Bernardino Community College District. I am a first-generation college student and a community college student, so I started my educational pathway attending a community college and transferred to UC Santa Barbara, where I was able to obtain my bachelor's degree. And that's really a really important part of my life. At the time, I did not realize how impactful community colleges were until I got into looking at being a professional, a student services professional for the community college system shortly after graduating with my bachelor's degree. And the reason why I share that is that as a student, I struggled tremendously navigating our systems. And I look back and think about my experiences as a community college student and realize that I really had challenges navigating our systems and navigating our processes. I think I took that with me, and I take that with me in the work that I do daily as a student services professional earlier on in my career, and now as the Vice Chancellor at San Bernardino Community College District. And so my role here is a lot larger. My role is really to open the doors for students to be successful, and that really means working closely to support our colleges as well as our Economic Development and Corporate Training Center. And we do that through revising policy, improving our programs and our services, seeking funding to support our underrepresented students, and really looking at how we collaborate with our community and our industry and our organizations that we serve. So our K through 12 partners, for example, they are really, really critical to the success of engaging students and promoting education after high school. Some examples of some projects that I've led within my current role is our common application for high school students and for any college students. What that means is that within the community college district, we have two colleges. We have San Bernardino Valley Community College, and we also have Crafton Hills College. And so prior to us implementing the common application, our students were required to fill out two applications if they wanted to maybe take a class at Crafton and take another class at San Bernardino Valley College. They had to go through two applications. And so that was a real barrier for our students. And this project, I'm really proud of. The project really allowed us to eliminate that barrier for our students. And so now students are only needing to fill out one application, and they can take classes at any of our campuses or colleges to further their education and complete their educational goal. The other thing I'd like to share is part of my role is to build relationships and support programs and services, and we do that through our local relationships, but also our regional. And so I'm happy to share that San Bernardino Community College District was just awarded $20 million to support various programs from our California Workforce Development Board. And this was really geared to expand some of our training programs in various different areas like health, logistics, trucking, water, and we also have our utility line clearance. So these are the type of programs that I am very excited about and passionate about because they create opportunities for our students and our communities.
We're talking about policy today on our program, Dr. Ornelas. So is there an area of the student experience that you feel has greatly improved as the direct result of good policy?
Yes, I think so. One of the areas that I think was helpful was the California Promise, and it was back in 2016 where there were competitive awards for colleges to create Promise programs. And I remember sitting at a table and with our team and really beginning to brainstorm an ideal program that would promote access to college, free college, and what that would look like. And so as part of that original assembly bill, the California College Promise Grant, which was formerly known as the Board of Governors Fee Waiver, was renamed and expanded to support students. And so I think that having same naming conventions is so important for students because we have so much terminology in higher education. And I think that now, it's been several years since we've implemented the College Promise Grant, that students are starting to learn and know, okay, this is a Promise Grant, and that means that I can get my tuition paid for. So I think that using that same terminology for our students goes a long ways, and I'm seeing the end result of some of those policies and those decisions that were made to support our students.
You're listening to Education Insight. On the phone with us is Dr. Nohemy Ornelas. She's the Vice Chancellor of Educational and Student Support Services for the San Bernardino Community College District. Doctor, how about an area that you feel really needs some work right now, that when marinating this problem or issue, you think policy could fix that? What comes to mind?
Both at the federal and state level, our access to technology and our abilities to automate is here now. And I remember when I first started in financial aid, we had to do everything by hand. We were calculating, we were highlighting, we were mailing, documents out. And in a blink of an eye, I'm looking, now where we have so much technology to help us with that. And I think we can take advantage of that, and we should take advantage of that. We can do that through increasing our data sharing agreements, and I know we're having a lot of conversations about that right now. But I really believe that if we do that, we can begin to eliminate the duplication of the various applications that students are required to complete to participate in programs that are designed to support them. So if a student wants to benefit from, a program in this department, they need to fill out an application. In addition to the admissions application that they've already completed, if they want to participate in another program to seek the benefits from there, they also need to fill out an application. And so my theory is we already have that information in our student system. We already know our student needs by completing the financial aid application. We know what their needs are, but yet we are having them fill out more applications to give them access to programs that they need. So if there was a magic wand, that is really where I would begin to do my work, is to have those conversations and to say, you know what, let's work together. We have the technology. Let's automate and let's support our students.
Mm-hmm. You're listening to Education Insight. Today we're talking about how policy is helping or needs to help our local students perform better and with fewer obstacles. Dr. Ornelas, could you describe the process of developing district policy and procedures for educational services? How does that work?
Yeah, so we work closely with our legislative team at the district, and we also have access to some services offered by the California Community College League, and that is to really ensure that our district is current with the various policies and procedures. And there's different steps that are involved depending on the type of policy, but specifically related to educational services, I think my role is really to bring our content experts together in a room and begin to have a conversation. Some of our policies are regulatory, and so we have to update them to ensure that we're complying with any state or federal regulations. But then there's other areas that will serve students and will support students. So having that conversation, having the content experts begin to look at our policies and our practices really ensure that they're at the forefront and that they're being implemented in a manner that will support and promote student success. So once we meet with our content experts and we have conversations, we draft the policies, and then we begin to vet them throughout our governance process. So depending on the type of policy, they may go to various different committees or constituency groups to allow them to provide input and feedback. And what that ultimately does is that it creates a transparent process as we're looking at changing policy or updating policies or revising some procedures. And then the policy ends up going to our board of trustees for final approval, and then we implement it. So it is a cycle that we go through to implement and process our policies.
What would you say is the most prominent barrier that you're seeing that is keeping students from reaching their academic and career goals right here in our region?
I would say that the two areas that I see are finances and the navigating of our complex system. We serve a large population of underrepresented students who have low socioeconomics, and having access to financial aid is so critical. Letting students know that they do not have to carry that burden of paying for college and the additional financial responsibilities that they have outside of college, I think really is something that we can work on here locally, and streamlining our process to ensure that students are able to navigate our system. And I think that our registration process, our enrollment process, all of the different accessing to services, accessing textbooks, we have a lot of things and a lot of steps that students have to take. And if we can begin to think about how students today respond to those needs, is really, really important. And if we can adjust and meet our students where they are today, I think that would be a big game changer for students in accessing education to reach their career goals.
The two problems that you cite, the students' own personal finance issues and then a complicated system. With that in mind, is there work that you know of being done locally and on Capitol Hill that would surely address these issues?
Yes, there's been a lot of reforms and legislation passed to support these efforts. I think now students in high school are required to fill out the financial aid application for graduation. And I think that having that as a component to graduation really provides the support to complete the application for students that would not have otherwise thought that college was within a reach. So I think that there's a lot of work being done. I know we are working with our elected officials and as a district have gone to Washington, D.C. to advocate for our students and advocate for our community and their needs.
On the telephone, Dr. Nohemy Ornelas, She is the Vice Chancellor of Educational and Student Support Services for the San Bernardino Community College District. We're talking about policy today. And Doctor, we appreciate you taking our phone call and help us to understand the policy process a little bit better. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
There is more of our discussion on policy and Inland Empire student success in just a moment when we are joined by the leader of growing inland achievement. I'm Lacey Kendall. You're listening to Education Insight. This is Education Insight. Marie Sakrekoff is the interim president and CEO of Growing Inland Achievement. It's a cross-sector network of education, government, and business partners in the Inland Empire that are working collectively toward a shared vision of increasing educational attainment and economic success. The vision is that by 2035, San Bernardino and Riverside counties will be recognized for our educated workforce, communities that are thriving, and a vibrant economy. A lofty goal for sure, but many folks are saying that with these collaborations, it is attainable. And to be transparent, GIA is the producer of Education Insight. Marie joins us by phone. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Lacey. Happy to be here.
Marie, so we're talking about policy today. When you think about local and even statewide education policy, what are some of the hot topics that come to your mind that you're seeing through your work with GIA this year?
So when we think about local and statewide education policy, we really need to think about us being in this post-pandemic space, right? We've seen that students who both graduate now as well as graduated during the pandemic are not enrolling in our higher education institutions. And so there is really an enrollment crisis at all of our institutions to really understand how not only enroll, but provide services that our students need in order to be successful, right? So thinking about how we're connected to the career that comes after that education. In addition, looking at how admissions are granted both to a UC and a CSU, looking at other pathways to the universities by looking at things like the dual enrollment programs or early college credit, right? The idea that you can take college courses in high school and understanding how to ensure that those students are able to take those courses. Also looking at the fact that, because of those revenue declines at local institutions, there's a significant budget deficit. I mean, the Legislative Analyst's Office has predicted about a $24 billion deficit. And so trying to understand how do we deal with those cuts?
Marie, what is some of the good work that you have noted that is being done here locally in the Inland Empire that is addressing some of those issues you just mentioned?
So locally, we are, as well as many of the other organizations across the region, really focused on key areas that support our students to get to and through college, as well as career technical ed and other post-secondary spaces. So the idea of focusing on pathways and the idea that students find that path earlier and earlier on, perhaps even middle school, in order to then transition through high school, through post-secondary, and into a career. So figuring out how to connect all of those things together. I mentioned earlier, as well as I'm sure other guests have, the idea around dual enrollment. There's been some success both locally and on the state level that we've been involved in, as well as partnering with the Inland Empire Community Foundation to ensure that there's additional funding for dual enrollment policies and practices to ensure that more students can get access to the early college credit that is so important and really a proven strategy to ensure that students are successful once they graduate from high school and go into college. Mm-hmm. I would also mention the work around FAFSA and CADA completion, right? So both looking at how to go to college and the financial reality that so many of our students and families face, and really trying to understand, how we can help ensure that students have the information that they need in order to complete those very important applications to get the money that they have earned.
You mentioned financial aid as a focus area for GIA and this region. Now, I know in October of last year, Assembly Bill 469 was passed, and that, for those that aren't familiar, it required all California high schools to ensure that every student, unless they opted out, complete and submit a free application for federal student aid or a California DREAM Act application. Anne-Marie, have you seen that policy having any positive impacts as a result?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We from the very beginning, through our Financial Affordability Action Network team, as well as other strategic partners in the region, advocated for the implementation of AB 469 to really ensure that students are completing one of the key steps to being successful in college. And so we've really seen a holistic approach of FAFSA and CADA completion since the passage of 469. It's not simply enough to mandate that students register their FAFSA and complete that, but really it's more about how do we ensure that our K-12 partners have the support they need to then support the students, right? So it's the idea that, through Cash for College, a program sponsored by the California Student Aid Commission that GIA is fortunate to support on behalf of the region, we've completed over 165 workshops. That's more than 45 than the original goal that CSAC set out for our region. And those workshops are vital to ensure that students who wouldn't normally have support get the support that they need to complete those applications. And let me tell you, we're seeing those numbers grow. In Riverside County, we had an increase. They're up to 68% completed. And in San Bernardino County, they're up to 57% completed. Now, that means over 3,000 more students completed this year than the previous year. That's 3,000 more families that are affected by them going to a post-secondary education. And once you complete the FAFSA, that's why it's so important to complete it. Once you complete it, you're that much more likely to actually enroll and go to school because you have the funds available to you to be able to do that. So it is not simply one piece of legislation or one piece of policy that makes a difference. It's how we all take a holistic approach to engage the entire community to make that successful.
On the telephone, Marie Sakrekoff, the Interim President and CEO of Growing Inland Achievement, discussing education policy that affects our Inland Empire schools and our students for good. Anne-Marie, thanks for taking our call today and for joining us on Education Insight.
Thanks so much for having me.
And that wraps up another edition of Education Insight. Thanks to all our guests today, and to those of you who have taken the time to write to us with suggestions for story ideas. If you haven't, and you have an idea, write to us at giatogether.org. I'm Lacey Kendall for Education Insight. Thanks for joining us.
Education Insight is produced in partnership with KVCR San Bernardino.
Our executive producer is Jacob Poor, and our production engineer is Tyler Veazey.
Alyssa Silva is our production assistant, and Lacey Kendall is your host.
Support is provided by Growing Inland Achievement, working together for inland education and economic success.
And by College Futures Foundation.
Do you have questions or suggestions for the future topics we should be covering?
Write to us at educationinsight.org.
Join us again next time for
Education Insight.